when I found out who I wanted to be. I wanted to be a pastry chef. Not the kind that you called for a birthday cake, but the kind that cooked in the world's most celebrated and demanding kitchens. The kind where food is not just eaten, it's remembered. My dream was Michelin. But on the outside, everything about me was wrong for the dream. I was 107 kilos, no college degree, no connections in the industry, and no safety net. Most people back home thought I was too young, too naive, rushing into something that I will eventually regret. I didn't come from culinary privilege or an Ivy League school. I came from Jaipur with nothing but stubbornness and obsession. Obsession for France, a Michelin star restaurant. The kind of kitchen that people like me would give anything to step into. So, after fighting with my parents, skipping college, working really hard, I finally arrived in a remote northeastern village town in France. The kind that you reach by taking a train from Paris to Luneville, which is as small as Jaipur, then going 9 kilometers into the forest, into the countryside, going up and down a hill to reach at my personal Vatican, Chateau de Adumini. But the dream that I had imagined and the reality that I walked into were two very different things. But for starters, it was beautiful. It had a own church on the premises, a river running through it. There were beehives and honey harvested right there. It had the most elegant dining room I had ever seen in my entire life. It had an 18th century dungeon that was half my height and had all the wine stored on it. And the best part, I lived right on the premises. They steered clear of me and only talked to me if they had to bark an instruction. But there was a reason that they isolated me. I was the darkest skin tone they had ever seen. They were afraid to touch the food that I would cook. They called me finicky, thinking that I cannot understand French. Regardless, the standard there was perfection. Hundreds of pineapples had to be cut into the small, identical, perfect shapes. Bowls had to be made out of sugar that were blown that gave me boils for days. My work list lasted for over 12 pages. Between prep and service, we had a 30-minute break where we would eat, and I was the only vegetarian. Soon they would dump bacon bits into the separate sauce that they had for me or mix up my dishes. They refused to let me make my own meals. So I survived on plain rice or couscous with a little bit of salt. If they had any picky, then maybe an apple. Good day. Then it was game time, my favorite part. 4 hours of intense service where my heart raced throughout. Because I was a desert apprentice, I also doubled as the dishwasher because deserts come usually at the end of a 6 to 8 meal course. A dishwasher in a hectic Michelin star restaurant meant that every half an hour, hundreds of utensils had to be cleaned, sanitized, put back to the station, where just for giggles, because it's so much pressure and such a high environment, people would not tell you that this pan that you're about to wash is scorching hot and will burn your hand. 4 hours of people screaming at me, throwing animal carcasses on my apron because it is so funny to hear Sejal scream. There is slight violence also involved. In our service, there was pâte de fouille, which is petite fours that we serve with espresso that were extremely delicate, so it was stored in the dungeons next to the wine, completely wrapped in sugar. The dungeons were 200 years old, had steep stone steps that were rugged and very difficult to go up and down on. One day, as I was walking up, a chef playfully bumped me. I went rolling down, coat torn, blood on the elbow. I remember a very sharp pain in my ribs and right shoulder. Everyone had heard me scream. No one came. After 15 minutes, I finally managed to get myself up, only to meet my
head pastry chef who was furious. He handed me a mop, told me to get everything cleaned up, get back to service, and scolded me for wasting 20 minutes of prep time. I stood up, went back to work, worked through the pain, finished my 10-hour shift, and then wobbled and clutched my broken body 2.5 hours through the forest, up and down a hill, to reach the hospital in Looneyville, where they diagnosed severely bruised lip, dislocated shoulder, bed rest for at least 20 days. The next day, when I told and reported everything back to the hotel, the head chef came banging at the door, the owner, by the way. He demanded that if I did not come back to the kitchen and started working, he would report my visa and send me back packing to India. I worked through the pain. That suffering builds character, and if I could survive this, I would survive anything. I was in love. I was in love with the idea of being a chef. I was in love with the idea of the person that I wanted to be. I was in love with the aromas of the kitchen, with the 2-minute order pressure rush, and I was in love with the idea that one day there will be a little girl sitting right here who is going to power through with the strength that she derives from the fact that she saw me and she can do anything as well. After a particularly grueling 14-hour shift where I was surrounded by the most expensive cheeses, breads, ingredients was thousands of euros, I went back home to my kitchen, to my room at 3 a.m. and made myself a bowl of rajma chawal. A soupy, mashed bowl of rajma chawal. And I cried. For 9 months, I had been working like a zombie, not feeling anything, just experiencing it all. But at 3 a.m., that one bowl provided me with so much comfort and companionship that I finally decided to choose me and not the version of me that I so badly fancied.
And with every bite, I kept on wondering that how could that food look so beautiful when it brought out the ugliest emotions in the people who cooked them? How could that food be awarded and celebrated when working in that kitchen felt like a punishment? How could that food feel grand when laboring for it has made me feel the smallest that I have ever felt? So I came back. But I was I had walked away from the dream that I had carried with me my entire life, and I did not know who I was without it. And somewhere in that silence, I asked myself questions that no one had ever asked me before. What was it that I actually believed in? What did I want my parents to mean? It wasn't about what I'd been taught or what the world respected, those tall, glossy, fancy cakes in Parisian windows, and certainly not the vision standards that everyone swore were the only right way. But the first time I was ready to stop chasing what was correct and actually ask what felt right to me. I came back from France in the peak of gold. And that time the answer was simple. I didn't want deserts that intimidate. I wanted them to connect. I wanted them to carry stories, to hold emotions, to not just edit themselves to fit into traditional beliefs, but to educate, to show the possibility of a newer future, a newer perspective. I came back, COVID peak, the world had shut. Everyone was making banana bread, and I was starting everything from scratch. I borrowed 5,000 rupees from my mother, 5,000 only, to buy my first mini oven. And that's how Sejal Parnami patisserie was started. I went around to sort out local ingredients from the grocery stores, made a weekly menu, sent it out to my contacts, uploaded it on Instagram, on directories, and sent it to them. My Instagram barely had 50 people on it, by the way. And I just waited. Slowly, orders came in, and we began a slow and steady journey of not just baking, but educating. When I first started this business, I was equipped that in 45 minutes, I would be able to do the preparation of at least 10 birthday cakes, 16 gatos, and 30 brownie boxes. I was skilled enough. That would have gotten me 45 minutes, 35,000. Instead, I chose to invest that time on that one phone call. I took one customer care call where I explained to them why the answering is different, why did it matter, how did it stand out, what different would they be if they just did not go for conventional and chose these instead. And that is how we began to not just sell desserts, but a belief system. Everything was made fresh, everything started gaining traction, the name started spreading, and soon enough, just as COVID was ending, we became the best cloud patisserie that Jaipur had ever seen. And then I shut it down. Willingly. To chase that one dream that had haunted me all along. To work in the toughest kitchens in the world and to prove once and for all to myself that I was capable. So, with the savings of my business, I moved to London. Sent out 500 resumes every day, walked into restaurants where they were not even hiring and applied for a job. Begged them for interviews just to get them to try me out. And in the end, I was able to score 50 interviews, 50 trials where I was accepted, except for two places. Now, the thing about the UK is that to legally work there, you cannot just have a job acceptance. You need them to believe in you enough that they will not just take you in, but also sponsor the UK government to pay for your visa and ask them declaring that you had more talent that they could find in their entire country. That was the war. The cruel line between being good enough to cook in their kitchens, but not being good enough to actually invest in. And finally, one day, that one was Gordon Ramsay's Savoy Grill at the legendary Savoy Hotel. A dream job all over again. But I started working there. I worked harder than I'd ever had, and soon enough, I was promoted. But that promotion came with a catch. It required a different visa. I came back to India only to do the paperwork. Honestly, it felt like a formality. I had my entire life waiting for me in London, my little rented room, my job, my team, my place in the kitchen, my place in the world. But in the last weeks of 2022, when I had just come back, UK had changed its immigration policies. The visa that I had pinned everything on was revoked. Gone. It was like the ground beneath my feet had disappeared. That is when I truly realized what it was like to be broken. To have finally the proof in my hands that my hands, my skill, my discipline not only stood in the hardest kitchens of the world, but actually shined through. But throughout the entire process, I realized there's a lot more that I would have liked to share. Through that journey, as she came back, started everything from scratch, had Sejal Parnami by the city, turned it into Messi's. But the idea that I have carried through and the idea that I would give you now is that real flavor, real food, made with real intentions and without any shortcuts, will always triumph popularity and everything that's commercial. The world doesn't want you to fit in, but want you to build the spaces that fit us. Our voices, our dreams, our ethics, and our passion. They always say that a square peg will never fit a round hole. Big deal. How about you carve a square one instead? Stop sanding down your edges and trimming a rawness and muting and diluting what keeps us whole.
That, according to me, is the real goal between the cracks. When we don't edit ourselves to fit in, but actually dare to stay whole and stay original until the world has no choice but to make space for us. Thank you.